I drove through a blizzard expecting a quiet Christmas, but I walked into a party hosted by my father in a house he did not own. He raised a toast to family sacrifice while my sister smirked, announcing my home was sold to pay her debts. I stared at the strangers holding new keys, then down at my phone. It glowed with a notification for $100,000 pending disbursement from a mortgage I never signed. My name is Haley Jones. I am 37 years old and I specialize in disaster management. For the last 4 months, I have been living out of a duffel bag in the American South, coordinating search and rescue teams for Granite Ridge Emergency Response. I have pulled people out of flooded basement. I have categorized wreckage. I have told mothers that we found their children and I have told mothers that we did not. I know what a destroyed home looks like. I know the specific hollow sound a structure makes right before it collapses. I thought I knew every variation of ruin there was until I drove my truck around the final bend of the mountain road leading into Cedar Hollow, Colorado, and saw my own house. It was Christmas Eve, December 24th. The snow was coming down in thick, heavy sheets, the kind that silences the world. I was exhausted. My bones felt like they were grinding against each other. All I wanted was a hot shower, a glass of cheap wine, and 12 hours of sleep in the bed I had bought with my own money 9 years ago. I had spent the last 6 hours driving from the airport in Denver, fantasizing about the silence of my living room, but there was no silence. My 2-story Craftsman house was lit up like a showroom on a strip in Las Vegas. Every window was blazing. There were string lights wrapped around the oak tree I had planted myself. There were cars parked all over my driveway and lining the street, blocking the path to my garage. I had to park my muddy truck half in a snowbank just to stop. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The engine ticked as it cooled. I checked the address on the GPS out of habit, even though I knew exactly where I was. This was my house. The deed was in my name. The mortgage was paid from my account. I had not authorized a party. I had not authorized guests. I stepped out of the truck and the cold air hit me, biting at my exposed face. But it did nothing to cool the sudden sharp spike of adrenaline in my chest. I could hear the music from the street. It was Bing Crosby. It sounded cheerful and warm and completely wrong. I walked up the path. The front door was unlatched, drifting open slightly to let out a stream of warm golden light, and the smell of cinnamon and roasting meat. I pushed the door open and stepped onto the hardwood floor I had refinished 3 summers ago. The house was full of strangers. There were at least 30 people in my living room. I recognized a few faces. There were men from my father's bowling league wearing ugly Christmas sweaters and holding tumblers of scotch. There were distant cousins I had not spoken to in a decade. And then there was the younger crowd. A group of 20-somethings with ring lights and tripods set up in the corner, filming dance routines. My sister's friends. No one noticed me at first. I was wearing my work boots, heavy cargo pants, and a thick parka stained with mud from 3 states away. I looked like an intruder in my own life. I saw my father, Gordon Jones, standing near the Christmas tree. The tree was massive, far too big for the room, decorated with ornaments I had never seen. He was wearing a velvet blazer that looked new. His face was flushed with drink and delight. He had his arm around my younger sister, Piper. Piper looked immaculate. She was wearing a sparkling silver dress that caught the light, her hair done up in complex curls. She was laughing at something Gordon said, tilting her head back in a pose that I knew was practice for the camera phone currently pointed at her face. Gordon raised a crystal flute of champagne. He tapped a spoon against it, the sharp ring cutting through the conversation. The room quieted down. The music was lowered. I stood in the entryway, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, and watched. "Attention everyone," Gordon said, his voice booming with the practiced cadence of a man who loved an audience. "If I could have a moment, I want to propose a toast." The guests turned toward him. Smiles. Anticipation. "To family," Gordon said, beaming at Piper. "To the sacrifices we make for the ones we love." It has been a hard year for my baby girl here. The business world is tough. But the Jones family does not leave one of our own behind. Piper squeezed his waist, looking up at him with wide, adoring eyes. Gordon cleared his throat. I am proud to announce that we have secured Piper's future. We have cleared the debts. We have wiped the slate clean. And we did it by making the hard choice to let go of this beautiful house. My stomach dropped. It felt like the floor had vanished. Sold, Gordon announced, raising the glass higher. To a wonderful young couple who will start their own memories here. We sold the house to save the family. To new beginnings. To new beginnings. The room echoed. I dropped my duffel bag. The thud was heavy. It was the sound of dead weight hitting timber. It was loud enough to make the people nearest to me jump. Heads turned. The ripple of silence spread from the door toward the Christmas tree until the entire room was quiet. Gordon lowered his glass. He squinted against the lights, trying to see who had made the noise. When he saw me, his smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a glitch in the performance before he plastered it back on, wider and tighter than before. Haley, he boomed. He opened his arms as if to embrace me from across the room. Look who made it. Talk about a Christmas miracle. We didn't think you'd be back from the disaster zone until New Year's. Piper looked at me. Her expression was not one of sisterly affection. It was a quick assessing glance, checking my outfit, my hair. And realizing I was not camera ready, she wrinkled her nose slightly. Haley, Piper said. Her voice high and light. The voice she used when she was streaming. You look intense. But hey. Great timing, she giggled. A sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. You are just in time to pack your stuff. We need the room cleared by tomorrow. The room chuckled nervously. A joke. It was just a joke. I did not laugh. I did not smile. I walked into the room, my muddy boots leaving dark prints on the rug. The guests parted for me, sensing something radiating off me that was unsafe. I stopped 5 tea from my father and sister. You sold the house, I said. My voice was low. It was the voice I used when I was giving orders on a radio frequency, ensuring there was no static, no room for misunderstanding. Gordon laughed. A nervous bubbling sound. Now, Haley. Don't look so grim. It is a celebration. Come have a drink. You look like you need it. You said you sold the house. I repeated. I looked around the room. I saw the decorations. I saw the champagne. I saw the lie draped over everything like tinsel. This house is in my name. Gordon. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. Gordon's smile stiffened. He stepped forward, trying to close the distance, trying to turn this into a private conversation in a public space. We can talk about the technicalities later. Honey, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time, I said. I looked him dead in the eye. Who signed the papers? The room was deadly silent now. The music had stopped completely. Gordon sighed. The long-suffering sigh of a martyr. He looked at the guests, inviting them to share in his burden of dealing with a difficult daughter. Haley. Please. You have been gone for months. You were unreachable. Piper was in trouble. Serious trouble. Her startup needed liquidity. You know how these things are. I was not unreachable. I said. I have a phone. I have email. You didn't call. You are always so busy saving the world. Piper interjected, stepping in front of Gordon. She crossed her arms. You are the strong one. Haley. You always figure it out. I needed help. Dad did what he had to do. Family is everything. Right? Isn't that what Mom would have wanted? She played the card. The dead mother card. She threw it on the table with the casual arrogance of someone who knew it usually won the hand. I looked at Piper. I looked at the diamond bracelet on her wrist. I looked at the professional lighting setup in the corner. Startups don't need liquidity for parties. Piper and Mom would not have stolen my house. It is not stealing. Gordon snapped, his voice losing its jovial edge. I acted as your power of attorney. I made an executive decision. I handled your affairs because you were rolling around in the mud in Alabama or wherever the hell you were. The power of attorney was for mail, I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through his bluster. It was for paying the utility bills. It was limited. Specific. It was necessary. Gordon shouted. He was red in the face. Now look around you. Haley. Look at these people. We are happy for once. We are happy. Why do you have to come in here and ruin it? Why do you always have to be so cold? He was trying to make me the villain. He was trying to turn the narrative so that I was the heartless sister crashing the family victory. It was a tactic he had used my entire life. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking past him. Standing by the fireplace looking thoroughly awkward in matching beige sweaters was a couple I did not know. They were young. Perhaps late 20s. They were holding champagne glasses, but they weren't drinking. The man, a guy with styled blonde hair, was clutching something in his other hand. It was a set of keys. They had a keychain attached. A big red bow. They looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. They looked like they had just realized they walked into a burning building. I walked past Gordon. I walked past Piper. I stopped in front of the couple. Who are you? I asked. Drew, the man said, his voice cracking. This is Leah. We bought the place. We closed yesterday. The woman, Leah, whispered. It's a beautiful home. They spoke as if they owned it. As if the ink was dry. As if I was a guest who had overstayed my welcome. I looked at the keys in Drew's hand. They were my keys. The brass one for the front door. The silver one for the back. Gordon was behind me now. Haley. Stop harassing the guests. Drew and Leah are lovely people. They made a very generous offer. A cash offer. Cash fast. No questions asked. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A single sharp buzz. I pulled it out. The screen was bright in the dim room. It was a notification from my bank application. It wasn't a deposit from the sale. A sale would take days to clear. And the funds would go to the escrow. Then to the mortgage payoff. This was different. I stared at the screen. My blood ran cold. Colder than the snow outside. Pending transaction. The screen readily disbursement. Home equity line of credit. The amount was staggering. $150,000. It wasn't a sale proceed. It was a loan. A loan taken out against the equity of the house I had spent 9 years paying for. They hadn't just sold the house. They had drained it first. I turned around slowly to face my father and sister. Gordon was wiping sweat from his forehead. Piper was checking her reflection in her phone screen, pretending not to listen. I held up my phone. I turned the screen so the brightness cut through the gloom, facing the room, facing the guests, facing the father who claimed he did it for family. You didn't just sell it, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like clarity. You are robbing it. Haley. Gordon started, reaching out a hand. $150,000, I said, reading the number aloud. Disbursement pending right now. While you are drinking champagne. While you are toasting to sacrifice. I looked at Drew and Leah. Did you know there is a second lien on this property as of 5 minutes ago? Drew's face went pale. He looked at Gordon. Gordon, you said the title was clean. It is clean. Gordon stammered. It is just paperwork. Administrative lag. Haley is confused. I am looking at the money leaving my equity. I said. I am looking at a theft in progress. The room was silent. The party was over. The music was dead. I looked at my father. You wanted to make a speech. You wanted to talk about sacrifice. Go ahead. Explain this. But he couldn't. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. I wasn't here to cry. I wasn't here to beg them to give it back. I looked at the timestamp on the notification. It was processed at 7 o'clock in the evening tonight. Even on a holiday. The automation went through. I put the phone back in my pocket. I looked at the keys in the Strayer's hand. I looked at my sister, who had finally stopped smiling. Get out, I said. Haley, you can't kick us out. Piper wed. It is Christmas. Get out. I wasn't asking. I was commanding. It was the tone I used when a levee was breaking and people had 10 seconds to move or die. But as I looked at them, I realized getting them out of the house wasn't the problem. The problem was the signature on the digital document somewhere in the cloud that said, I had agreed to this. The problem was that they hadn't just taken the house. They had taken my name and I was going to take it back. The chaos of the party swirled around me. But my mind was not in the room. My mind was rewinding, pulling apart the last 4 months of my life to pinpoint the exact moment I had handed them the weapon they used to shoot me. It was not a sudden theft. It was a slow, methodical dismantling of my boundaries. And looking back, I could see every loose screw I had failed to tighten. It started in September. I was packing for the deployment to the south. The forecast showed a season of violent storms, and I knew I would be gone for a long time. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table currently covered in a buffet of hors, and slid a single sheet of paper toward my father. It was a limited power of attorney. I remembered the specific wording because I had drafted it myself using a standard legal template I found online. I was meticulous. I was careful. Or so I thought. I had authorized Gordon Jones to handle specific tasks, collecting certified mail, paying the water and electricity bills from a joint checking account I kept for house expenses and signing for package deliveries. That was it. Just for the essentials, Dad, I had said, capping my pen. If anything big comes up, you call me. If the roof leaks, you call me. Do not hire anyone without my approval. Gordon had laughed. That easy. Rumbling laugh that made everyone trust him. He tucked the paper into his leather satchel, the one he had carried since his days as a darker-haired Sherpa man. Haley, honey, you worry too much. I'm just keeping the lights on. You go save the world. Let me handle the homeront. I trusted him. He was my father. He was terrible with his own money, always chasing a get-rich-quick scheme or investing in a friend's doomed restaurant. But he had never touched mine. I thought there was a line. I thought the line was blood. I was wrong. The line was opportunity. The first month of my deployment was standard. I spent 16 hours a day in mud and rain coordinating supply drops. When I did video call home, the connection was usually grainy. But even through the pixelation, I began to notice shifts. It was the background of Piper's video calls. Piper had always lived in a chaotic orbit of half-finished degrees and sudden passions. 1 month she was a life coach. The next she was selling handmade candles. But in late October, her background changed. She wasn't calling from her cramped apartment downtown anymore. She was calling from a room with crown molding and distinct pale yellow walls. My guest room walls. I am just house-sitting. Piper had chirped when I asked, waving a manicured hand. Dad said the pipes might freeze if no one was running the water. Plus, the lighting here is so much better for my content. Look at this ring light setup. She tilted the camera. I saw my vintage armchair. The one I had reupholstered myself, draped in a faux fur throw that I definitely did not own. Looks like you are moving in, I had said, feeling a prickle of irritation. Oh, stop being a landlord, Haley. Piper had rolled her eyes. I am building a brand. Do you know how much money influencers make? I just need a backdrop that screams success. Fake it till you make it. Right? Then Gordon joined the frame. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes were heavy, but his smile was frantic. Too wide. She is really trying. Haley. She has a plan this time. She just needs the right image to attract investors. Investors? I asked. For what? A lifestyle brand? Piper said vaguely. Wellness. Crypto. It is complicated. You wouldn't get it. You are too analog. Then came the requests. They were small at first. Frictionless. Haley. The heater needs a part. Can you transfer 500? Gordon asked a week later. I sent it. Haley. Piper's car broke down and she needs to get to a meeting with a sponsor. Can you float us a 000? I will pay you back when my pension check clears on the 1st. He asked 10 days after that. I sent it. I sent it because I was tired. I sent it because I was 12,200 m away, and I could not fix a car or a heater from a command center in a flood zone. I sent it because money is the easiest way to say I love you when you do not have the energy to say the words. But the pension check repayment never came and the requests stopped being about repairs and started being vague. Cash flow issues. Bridge loans. The unease started as a low hum in the back of my skull. It was the same instinct that told me a retaining wall was about to give way. 2 weeks ago on a Tuesday night, I was sitting in a motel room in Alabama. The rain was hammering against the window. I couldn't sleep. I was scrolling through my phone, bored, and for no reason other than curiosity. I opened a real estate application. I like to check the estimated value of my property. It was a vanity metric. A reminder that I had built something solid in a life that was often chaotic. I typed in my address. 342 Maplewood Drive, Cedar Hollow, Colorado. The page loaded. My heart stopped. Across the main photo of my house, a photo I had never taken, showing the front porch swept clean and adorned with a wreath I did not own, was a bright red banner, pending sale. I sat up in bed. Blinked, thinking I had typed the wrong number. I refreshed the page. Status pending. List price $550,000. It wasn't just listed. It was under contract. I scrolled down. My fingers trembling. The listing description was breathless and filled with lies. Motivated seller. Cash only preferred. Quick close. And there at the bottom of the page was the listing agent. Mason Klein. I knew Mason. He was a fixture at the bowling alley where my father spent his Thursday nights. Mason was a man who wore suits that were slightly too shiny and drove a car that was slightly too expensive for a real estate agent in a small town. His billboard on the highway said Mason makes it move. But everyone in town knew his specialty was distress. He sold divorce houses. He sold foreclosure houses. He sold the houses of old people who had died without a will. He did not sell prime well-maintained craftsman homes owned by women who paid their mortgage on time. Unless those women weren't the ones selling. I called Gordon immediately. It was 2 o'clock in the morning in Colorado. But I didn't care. The phone rang and rang and rang. It went to voicemail. Hi. This is Gordon. Leave a message and have a blessed day. Dad. I said. My voice tight. Why is my house listed on Zillow? Call me back now. Called Piper. It went straight to voicemail. I texted her. What is going on with the house? The status indicator bubbled. She was typing. Then it stopped. Read at 2:05 a.m. No reply. The silence was an answer. The silence told me everything I needed to know. They weren't confused. They weren't asleep. They were hiding. I did not go to sleep. I got up, made a pot of terrible motel coffee, and I went to work. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I did what I did when a disaster site was declared secure. I started the documentation process. I took screenshots of everything. I screenshot the listing. I screenshot the photos of my living room, noting the date they were uploaded. I went into my bank application. I looked at the transfer history. November 2nd. Transfer to Gordon Jones. $1,000. November 12th. Transfer to Gordon Jones. $2,500. November 28th. Venmo to Piper Jones. $500. I logged into my email. I searched for power of attorney. I found the scan I had sent to myself before I left. I downloaded it. I opened the file properties to verify the creation date. Then I went to the county recorder website. It was clunky and slow, but public records don't lie. I searched my name. There was a document recorded on December 1st. Notice of intent to sell. Signed by Gordon Jones, attorney. In fact. But then I saw something else. A second document recorded 3 days ago. Deed of trust. I didn't understand. If they were selling the house, why was there a new mortgage deed recorded? Unless the sale hadn't closed yet, and they were taking money out beforehand. I needed a professional. I waited until 7 in the morning. Mountain Time. I called Talia Voss. Talia and I had gone to college together. She had gone to law school. I had gone into emergency management. She was now a shark of a real estate attorney in Denver. The kind of woman who wore stilettos to construction sites and terrified contractors. Haley. She answered on the second ring. You are back. Let's get drinks. I am not back, I said. And I need you to look at something. I think my father is selling my house. Talia didn't gasp. She didn't ask. How could he, or are you okay? She switched modes instantly. Send me the address, she said. And send me whatever document you think gave him the authority to do it. I emailed her the folder I had compiled during the night. I am looking at it now, Talia said. The sound of her typing furious in the background. Okay. I see the listing. Mason Klein. That guy is a bottom feeder. Okay. I am pulling the recorder data. There was a long silence on the line. I held my breath. Haley, Talia said. And her voice had dropped an octave. It was the tone of a doctor looking at a bad X-ray. You signed a limited POA. Texas form. It explicitly lists powers. Banking. Mail. Utilities. Does it list real estate? I asked. No. Talia said. It does not check the box for real property transactions. But there is a catch. There is a general clause at the bottom to perform any act necessary to maintain the principal standard of living. It is vague. A shady title company might accept it if the agent pushes hard enough. Mason Klein would push. I said. Here is the problem. Talia said. I am looking at the credit inquiries on your file. I have access to the secondary market data. There was a hard pull on your credit last week for the buyers. No, Talia said sharply. For you, or rather for Haley Jones, a credit line inquiry, a home equity line of credit, a HELOC. I asked. Why would I open a line of credit if I'm selling the house? You wouldn't. Talia said. But someone who wanted to strip the equity out of the house before selling it to a cash buyer might if they sell the house for cash. The check goes to the seller. But if they take a loan out against the house first, they get that cash immediately from the bank and then they sell the house to a third party who pays off the first mortgage. But maybe misses the second one if the title search is sloppy. I felt the blood drain from my face. They are double dipping. They are trying to get the loan money and the sale money. It looks like they are trying to max out the credit before the title transfers, Talia said. Haley, listen to me very carefully. You need to freeze your credit right now today and you need to get to Cedar Hollow because if that HELOC funds, the money lands in your account. And if your father has access to that account via the POA, He can transfer it out. I finished. He can wipe you out. Talia corrected. He can take the equity, sell the house to these unsuspecting buyers, and leave you with no home and a debt that isn't paid off because the purchase price might not cover both loans if he sells it cheap for a quick deal. How fast can it fund? I asked. If it is a private lender or a fast-track HELOC, 48 hours. Talia said. When did you see the pending status? Yesterday. You have to go. Talia said. Do not call him again. Do not tip him off that you know about the HELOC. If he knows you know, he will move the money the second it hits. Just show up. Catch him with the pen in his hand. I am on my way, I said. And Haley, Talia added, her voice hard. Prepare yourself. They aren't just selling a house. They are liquidating you. This isn't a family misunderstanding. This is a heist. I hung up the phone. I looked at the rain outside the motel window. Talia was right. My father wasn't just a bumbling man trying to help my sister. He was leveraging my existence to fund her delusions. I packed my bag in 4 minutes. I checked out of the motel. I drove to the nearest airport and bought a one-way ticket to Denver. As I sat at the gate waiting for the flight, I opened my laptop one last time. I created a new folder on my encrypted drive. I named it Property. Inside, I created subfolders: Evidence, Communications, Financials. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a plaintiff. I landed in Denver in the middle of a blizzard. The roads were treacherous. I rented a 4-wheel drive truck because my sedan wouldn't make it up the pass. I drove for hours, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, rehearsing what I would say. I thought about the Christmas parties of my childhood. I thought about how Gordon used to put a star on the tree and tell us that as long as we had each other, we were rich. I realized now that he had always been defining rich differently than I did. To him, people were resources, and I was just an asset class. He hadn't fully tapped yet. When I turned the corner onto Maplewood Drive and saw the lights, saw the cars, saw the celebration, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They weren't just selling the house. They were celebrating the heist. They were drinking champagne purchased with the equity of my hard work. I checked my phone one last time before I stepped out of the truck. HELOC disbursement pending. Talia was right. The money was moving. The clock was ticking. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. It hurt my lungs. Good. I needed the pain to keep me sharp. I walked up the driveway, past the sign that said sold, and I prepared to burn their little fantasy to the ground. I sat in the cab of my rented truck, the engine idling just enough to keep the heater running against the sub-zero temperature outside. I had driven 2 blocks away from my house from the party I had just crashed and pulled into the empty snow-swept parking lot of a closed Baptist church. The silence here was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the windshield wipers clearing the accumulation of snow. My laptop was open on the center console, tethered to my phone's hotspot. The blue light of the screen illuminated the cab, casting sharp shadows across the dashboard. I wasn't crying. I had moved past the point of tears somewhere between the welcome home toast and the realization that my father was a thief. I was in triage mode now in my line of work. You do not weep over the rubble. You map the structural integrity of what remains to see if it can be salvaged. I had Talia Voss on speakerphone. Her voice was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. "Okay, Haley," Talia said. Her voice was crisp, lacking any of the softness one might expect for a friend whose family had just betrayed them. "I am inside the county recorder portal and the bank's back end. I need you to look at the screen I just shared with you. Are you seeing this?" I refreshed the browser. A document loaded. It was a PDF of a home equity line of credit agreement dated 10 days ago. "I see it," I said. My voice sounded mechanical. "Look at the signature page," Talia commanded. I scrolled down. There on the line marked borrower was a scroll I recognized instantly. It was my father's handwriting, but it was tighter, more jagged than usual. Next to it, he had printed Gordon Jones, attorney. In fact, he used the power of attorney, I said. But the POA was limited. It didn't authorize debt instruments. It doesn't matter what it authorized if the bank officer didn't bother to read the fine print. Talia said, the sound of her typing furious in the background. Mason Klein probably pushed this through a friendly lender who looked the other way. But here is the smoking gun. Haley, look at the disbursement schedule. I opened the second file she sent. It was a transaction log. 3 transfers. Talia listed. The first one was for $20,000 initiated 48 hours after approval. The second was for $50,000 sent yesterday morning, and the third, the big one, $80,000, is the one pending right now. Where is it going? I asked, though I already felt the sickness rising in my throat. It is not going to the house, Talia said. It is not going to repairs. It is going to a checking account at Wells Fargo ending in 8842. I closed my eyes. 8,842. It wasn't a random number. It was Piper's birth month and year. April 82. She had used that combination for everything since she was a teenager. Her locker combination. Her email password. And now the account receiving the liquidated equity of my life. It is Piper. I said, he is draining the equity and funneling it directly to her. Gets worse. Talia said. I pulled the purchase agreement for the sale to Drew and Leah Mercer. I want you to look at page 4. The deposit section. I navigated to the contract. It was a standard Colorado real estate form, but there were additional clauses typed in at the bottom in a different font. Likely added by Mason. Earnest money deposit $40,000. Conditions non-refundable upon acceptance. Non-refundable? I whispered. That is insane. No buyer in their right mind signs a non-refundable deposit of $40,000 before an inspection. They do if they are desperate or if they are being told there is a bidding war and they have to lock it in, Talia said. Mason Klein played them. He knows there is a title issue. He knows this sale might implode when you contest it. But if the sale fails, who keeps the deposit? The seller. I said. My father. And the agent gets his cut, Talia added. They aren't just stealing from you, Haley. They are stealing from those kids. They took $40,000 from Drew and Leah. And they took $150,000 from your equity. That is nearly $200,000 extracted from this property in less than 2 weeks. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It was a clarifying sensation. It burned away the shock and left only geometry. I saw the angles. I saw the trap. How do we stop it? I asked. We killed the transaction, Talia said. I am going to list the leverage points. You need to write these down. We are going to hit the escrow company with a notice of dispute. We are going to flag the title search. But first, we need to prove that the power of attorney was abused. Did you send that email to Mason? Not yet, I said. Do it now, Talia said. Keep it short. Innocent. You are the confused daughter. Make him admit he is acting on verbal instructions, not written ones. If he admits he is taking orders from the family and not the principal, that is you. He loses his license. I minimized the call window and opened my email client. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady. I typed Mason's address. I CC'd Talia's professional email, but I blind copied my own secure archive. Subject question about the closing. Dear Mr. Clean. I just arrived in Cedar Hollow and was surprised to see the sale signs. My father mentioned you were helping us. Could you please forward me the full disclosure package and a copy of the power of attorney you used to authorize the listing? I do not recall signing a specific authorization for the sale, and I want to make sure my records are updated for tax season. Thank you. Haley Jones. I hit send. Send. I told Talia. Good. Talia said. Now listen to me. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. That means as long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without telling the other person. I want you to download a voice recorder application that uploads directly to the cloud. Gordon calls you. If Mason approaches you. If Piper tries to give you a soba story you record every second. Do not say a word that isn't on tape. Understood? I said in Haley. Talia's voice softened slightly. You need to secure the physical space. Do you have your dash cam? It is running. I said. It has been recording since I pulled into the driveway. Save that footage. She said. Proves residency. Proves you have keys. It proves you were not abandoning the property as they might claim in an affidavit. I spent the next 20 minutes building the file system Talia had recommended. I created a folder on my encrypted hard drive named Property Dispute. I created a naming convention that would stand up in court. Year, month, day, hour, minute. Description. Toothy 2412224-1945 Helic Disbursement Log PDF 20241224 2000 Mercer Purchase Contract PDF 2024192224 2015 Piper Bank Transfer Trace PNG. It was tedious work. It was the kind of paperwork I usually did while sitting in a FEMA tent cataloging the destruction of strangers' lives. Doing it for my own life felt surreal. Like I was performing an autopsy on a body that was still breathing. My email chimed a reply from Mason Clean. He had responded in 6 minutes on Christmas Eve. He was nervous. I opened the email. Haley, great to hear you made it back. We were worried about you down south regarding the paperwork. Don't worry about the red tape. I have everything on file at the office. Your dad and Piper were very clear that the family was in agreement on this to handle Piper's situation. Gordon assured me everyone was on the same page to get this liquidity fast. We are closed. So, let's just enjoy the holiday. We can debrief next week. Best, Mason. I read it out loud to Talia. Got him? Talia said. And I could hear the smile in her voice. He just admitted he relied on Gordon's assurance of family agreement, rather than your written consent. Family agreement is not a legal standard for real estate conveyance. He just confessed to negligence. I will forward it to the escrow officer. I said. Do it. Talia said. And attach the notice of dispute I just drafted for you. Tell them that any funds dispersed to Mason Klein or Gordon Jones will be considered theft and they will be liable. I was about to hit send on the second email when another notification popped up on my banking application. It wasn't an email. It was a credit alert from the monitoring service Talia had told me to install an hour ago. New inquiry detected. I clicked the alert. My heart hammered against my ribs. Inquiry type secured lending. Lender Iron Rock Capital LLC. Amount requested $50,000. Talia. I said. My voice tight. What is Iron Rock Capital? I heard Talia typing rapidly. Iron Rock. Iron Rock. Okay. I found them. They are a hard money lender based out of a strip mall in Aurora. High interest. Predatory. They lend against assets when banks won't touch you. Why am I getting an inquiry from them? I asked. The Helilock is pending. The sale is pending. Why do they need more money? Because the Helilock money is already spoken for, Talia said. Her voice grim. Haley. Think about it. If Piper's debt was just a failed startup, $20,000 or $30,000 would cover it. But they are pulling $150,000 from the Helilock, $40,000 from the deposit, and now they are trying to get another $50,000 from a loan shark against the house title before the sale closes. That is nearly $250,000, I said. Piper doesn't have a startup debt. She has a gambling problem or something worse. They are trying to strip the equity down to the studs. Talia said they know once the sale to the Mercers goes through the title transfers, and they can't borrow against it anymore. They are trying to squeeze every last drop of blood out of the stone before they hand it over. If Iron Rock lends that money, do they put a lien on the house? I asked. Yes, Talia said. And hard money lenders are aggressive. If they lend $50,000 tonight and you fight the sale, Iron Rock will foreclose on your house to get their money back. Regardless of whether you signed it or not, they will tie you up in court for years. I have to stop it, I said. You can't call Iron Rock, Talia said. They don't care. They just want the asset. You have to cut off the source. You have to stop Gordon. I looked out the window of the truck. The snow was falling harder now, burying the world in white. I thought about my father's face as he raised that glass of champagne. I thought about the sacrifice he talked about. He wasn't sacrificing anything. He was feeding me to the wolves to save his favorite child. I am not just going to send emails. Talia, I said. I am going back there. Haley, be careful, Talia warned. If they are desperate enough to go to a hard money lender, they are desperate enough to do something stupid. I am not going to fight them, I said. Putting the truck in gear. I am going to witness them. I hung up the phone. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 8:40 in the evening, Christmas Eve. I checked the alert again. Iron Rock Capital status reviewing. They were trying to close a hard money loan on a holiday. That meant they knew someone on the inside or they were paying a premium for speed. Mason Klein was likely brokering this, too. I reversed the truck out of the church parking lot. My tires spun in the fresh powder before gripping the asphalt. I wasn't driving back to the party to scream. I was driving back to gather the final piece of evidence. I needed to know exactly who was signing my name on that hard money application. I drove back toward Maplewood Drive. The lights of my house were still blazing in the distance, a beacon of fraud in the silent night. I felt a strange sense of calm. They thought they were stripping a house. They didn't realize they were dismantling a bomb, and they had just cut the wrong wire. The 24 hours leading up to that moment in the living room had been a blur of adrenaline and logistics, a frantic race to outrun a financial execution. It had started 12,200 miles away in a command tent in Alabama. I had walked into my regional director's office with mud still caked on my boots and told him I had a family emergency. I did not tell him my family was dying. I told him my family was robbing me. He signed the leave paperwork without asking questions, handing me a satellite phone and telling me to go. I drove 2 hours to Birmingham at 80 miles per hour. I booked the last seat on a flight to Denver. A middle seat in the back row near the lavatories. The airport was a chaos of holiday travelers. People clutching gifts and dragging screaming children. I moved through them like a ghost. I found a corner near my gate, curled my legs up on a vinyl bench, and tried to sleep for 40 minutes. I kept my arms wrapped tight around my leather binder. It contained the printed deed to my house, the mortgage statements I had downloaded at the base camp, and a printout of the listing I had found online. I slept with my chin resting on the leather, guarding it like it was the nuclear codes. When I landed in Denver, the blizzard was already shutting down the secondary highways. The rental car line was 40 people deep. I didn't wait. I used my corporate account, bypassed the counter, and walked straight to the Emerald Isle. There was only one vehicle left that could handle the pass of black Ford Expedition that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes. I threw my bag in the passenger seat and drove out into the whiteout. The drive to Cedar Hollow usually took 2 hours. That night it took 4. I spent those 4 hours on the phone. The reception cut in and out as I wound through the mountain corridors, but I was persistent. My first call was to the fraud department of the bank that held the new home equity line of credit. I am reporting unauthorized activity, I told the operator, a woman named Brenda, who sounded exhausted. My social security number ends in 4599. The property address is 342 Maplewood Drive. I am the sole owner. I did not sign a credit agreement. Mom. The system shows the funds have been dispersed, Brenda said. The verification was done via mobile notary. The notary is lying, I said, gripping the steering wheel as the truck slid slightly on a patch of black ice. I have been in Alabama for 4 months. Check my debit card usage. Check my flight records. I was not in Colorado to sign that paper. I want you to freeze the account. I want you to flag the transaction as fraud. I want a case number. I can open a dispute, Brenda said, her voice wary. But if the funds are already out, we have to launch an investigation to claw them back. It takes 10 to 14 business days. Give me the case number, I said, and put a note on the file. The borrower is physically entering the premises to stop the collateral damage. Next, I called Talia. She had been working while I was in the air. I sent you a document, Talia said. It is an affidavit of unauthorized conveyance. It basically states that you, the owner, have not authorized any sale, transfer, or encumbrance of the property. Puts the world on notice. I can't notarize it in a car, Talia, I said. You don't need to notarize it yet to make them scared, Talia said. You just need to sign it and slap it on the table. It is a sworn statement. If they proceed after seeing it, they are knowingly participating in fraud. It strips them of the innocent buyer defense. I am almost to town, I said. I need hard copies.
Honesty.
Clouds get hacked. I need paper. There is a 24-hour print shop near the highway exit, Talia said. Print 3 copies. 1 for the escrow officer, 1 for the bank, and 1 for you. Do not give your copy to anyone. You let them read it. You let them photograph it, but you do not let it leave your hand. I pulled into the print shop at 7 o'clock in the evening. The fluorescent lights were humming, a stark contrast to the soft Christmas lights stringing the lampposts outside. The clerk was a teenager with purple hair, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. I logged into the public terminal and pulled up the files. I printed everything. The timeline of transfers, the emails from Mason Klein, the original deed, the affidavit Talia had drafted. I stood at the collating table organizing the papers into 3 distinct stacks. I stapled them with a force that made the clerk look up from her phone. Thwack. I wasn't just organizing paper. I was loading ammunition. I drove the final 10 minutes to my house in silence. I turned off the radio. I needed to hear the engine, the tires crunching on snow, the sound of my own breathing. When I turned onto my street, I killed the headlights. I let the truck roll to a stop 2 houses down, hidden in the shadow of a large spruce tree. I didn't storm in. That is what an amateur does. That is what an angry daughter does. I needed to be a cold observer. I sat in the dark cab and watched. The house was glowing. It looked warm. It looked inviting. Through the large bay window, the one I had installed to let in more morning light, I could see the party in full swing. I saw my father, Gordon, holding a glass of wine, laughing with his head thrown back. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had finally outrun his shadow. Then I saw the couple, Drew and Leah. They were standing near the fireplace. Drew was holding up a set of keys, dangling them for a group of people to see. He was beaming. He looked like a man who had just won a prize. Leah was hugging someone, accepting congratulations. They weren't just celebrating a holiday. They were celebrating ownership. I realized then that the party wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. Gordon and Piper had invited everyone. The neighbors, the friends, the bowling league to create a social wall. They knew I was coming back eventually. They wanted to present me with a fat comple. They wanted to shame me into silence. How could I kick out a nice young couple in front of the whole town on Christmas Eve? How could I be the monster who ruined the holiday? They were weaponizing my embarrassment. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. They had miscalculated. They thought I was still the girl who was afraid of making a scene. They didn't know I had spent the last 4 months shouting over the roar of generators and excavators. I wasn't afraid of a scene. I was afraid of losing the only thing I had ever built for myself. I opened the door of the truck and stepped out. The wind was biting. But I didn't zip up my parka. I wanted them to see the mud on my clothes. I wanted them to see the reality of where I had been while they were spending my money. I checked my pocket. Phone. Voice recorder application running. I checked my bag. 3 binders. The hard drive. I stood on the sidewalk for 10 seconds and rehearsed the 3 sentences I needed to say. I stripped away the emotion. I stripped away the hurt. 1. I did not sign. 2. The house is still mine. 3. Anyone who touches this money is an accomplice. I walked up the driveway. The snow crunched under my boots. I could hear the music now. Frank Sinatra singing about a winter wonderland. I pushed the front door open. The warmth hit me first. Then the smell of roast beef and expensive perfume. I stepped into the foyer. I didn't stop. I walked straight past the coat rack where strangers' coats were piled high. I walked into the living room and positioned myself directly under the archway, the architectural center of the house. This was the moment I had replayed in my head during the drive. The music died. The conversation stopped. Gordon turned. Piper froze. I saw the recognition in their eyes. It wasn't love. It was panic. Gordon recovered first. He put on his showman's mask. Haley, look who made it. I let him speak. I let him make his toast. I let him dig the hole deeper. I watched him raise his glass and tell the room that the house was sold to save the family. I watched Piper smirk, secure in her delusion that she had won. When the room quieted, after I had dropped my bag and shattered their facade, I looked at the young couple holding my keys. I have a question, I said, my voice cutting through the thick tension of the room. I held up the binder in my hand. Did the title company inform you that there is an active fraud investigation on this property number? Drew blinked. What? No. We closed yesterday. Gordon stepped forward. His hands raised in a placating gesture. Now, Haley, don't use big words to scare the kids. It is all done. The papers are signed. The money is wired. It is closed. He said the word closed with such finality, as if it were a magic spell that erased ownership. I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip despite the chill I had brought into the room. Closed? I repeated. Yet, Gordon said, gaining a little confidence. It is a done deal. You can't unring a bell. Honey. I opened the binder. I turned to the affidavit I had printed 20 minutes ago at the copy shop. I looked at the timestamp on the bottom of the page. You keep using that word, I said, stepping closer to him until I could smell the scotch on his breath. But I don't think you know what it means. A deal isn't closed when you sign a paper. Gordon. A deal is closed when the title recorder stamps the deed. And as of 10 minutes ago, the recorder's office has a flag on this file that will stop that stamp from ever hitting the page. I slammed the binder shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. This isn't a closing, I said. It is a crime scene. The silence in the room was not empty. It was heavy. Pressurized. The kind of silence that happens right before a ceiling beam snaps under the weight of a collapsed roof. I stood in the center of the living room, my boots still dripping melting snow onto the hardwood floor. And I held out my hand toward Drew Mercer. I want to see the closing statement, I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried to the back of the room where my father's bowling friends were standing with their drinks halfway to their mouths. And I want to see the wire confirmation for the funds you claim you sent. Drew looked at the keys in his hand as if they had suddenly turned into burning coal. He looked at Gordon. Then he looked at his wife, Leah. But Leah did not look at him. She did not look at Gordon. Her eyes darted instantly, instinctively to Piper. It was a micro-reaction, faster than a heartbeat. But I saw it. Why would the buyer look at my sister for reassurance? Piper was not the seller. Piper was not the agent. Piper was supposedly just the beneficiary of this tragedy. If we don't have the full packet on us, Drew stammered, shifting his weight. Mason has the file at his office. We just have the keys and the welcome packet. You handed over a non-refundable deposit of $40,000, I said, reciting the number I had seen on the contract in my binder. And you wired the purchase price without a final settlement statement in your hand on Christmas Eve. Gordon said it was standard. Drew's voice pitched up. Defensive now. He said, because of the holiday, the paperwork catch-up would happen on Monday. We trusted him. You trusted him? I repeated. I turned to my father. Gordon was gripping the back of the sofa, his knuckles white. The jovial host mask was sliding off, revealing the terrified old man underneath. Tell them. Gordon. Tell them about the paperwork catch-up. Gordon opened his mouth, but Piper stepped in. She moved with the fluid, practiced grace of someone who knew where the camera was, even when no one was filming. She stepped between me and our father, her silver dress catching the light from the Christmas tree. Stop it. Haley, Piper said, her voice trembling with an emotion that sounded perfectly calibrated. Just stop attacking everyone. You don't know what happened. You don't know what I have been through. She looked around the room, gathering the sympathy of the guests like a harvest. I was trying to build something for us, she said, a tear tracking perfectly down her cheek. My partners. They lied to me. They took the investment capital. They left me with nothing but debt collectors banging on my door. I was going to lose everything. Dad was just trying to save me from going to jail. Why do you care more about a house than your own sister? It was a good performance. I saw the faces of the neighbors soften. I saw my aunt dab at her eyes with a napkin. They looked at me, the cold, successful sister in the mud-stained parka, and then at Piper, the fragile victim in the sparkling dress. I did not blink. I did not feel a flicker of guilt. I had spent 4 months categorizing debris, and I knew the difference between a tragedy and a controlled demolition. That is a moving story. Piper, I said flatly. But tears do not clear a title. I opened the binder in my hand to the page I had flagged with a yellow sticky note. I held it up. You say the house is sold, I said, addressing the room. You say the deal is closed. But a house cannot be sold with clear title if there is an active undisclosed lien against it. And as of tonight, there is a pending disbursement of $150,000 from a home equity line of credit against this address. A murmur rippled through the room. The phrase home equity line of credit was specific enough to sound dangerous. What is she talking about? Gordon. It was Uncle Ted, my mother's brother. He had been standing by the punch bowl, quiet until now. He stepped forward, his face darkening. You told us Haley agreed to the sale. You told us she signed off on everything before she left for the disaster zone. Gordon wiped his forehead with a cocktail napkin. The paper disintegrated in his sweat. She did. Ted. She is confused about the timeline. The line of credit it was part of the bridge financing. It gets paid off in escrow. It is complicated financial structuring. It is not complicated. I cut in. It is theft. The money from that credit line is not going to escrow. It is currently pending a transfer to a personal checking account. I looked at Piper. An account ending in 8842. Piper stopped crying. Her face went rigid. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a flash of pure venomous panic. You hacked my bank account, she hissed. I audited my property, corrected, and I found you draining it. I turned back to Drew and Leia. They were huddled together now, looking less like homeowners and more like hostages. You bought a house that is currently being used as an ATM machine. I told them. Mason Klein knows this. Mason Klein set this up. Did he tell you that he had his license suspended in 2018 for failing to disclose liens to buyers? Did he mention that he is currently on probation with the state real estate board for exactly this kind of fast closing scheme? Drew's jaw dropped. What? No. He said he was the top agent in the county. He is the top agent for people who need to hide money, I said. That is a lie, Gordon shouted. He pushed off the sofa, finding a burst of desperate energy. Mason is a good man. He helped us when you were too busy playing hero to answer your phone. We have the power of attorney. It is legal. I have the right to sign for you. The power of attorney? I said slowly, tasting the words. Let's talk about that document. I flipped the page in my binder. I walked over to the coffee table, pushed aside a tray of untouched shrimp cocktails, and laid the paper down. It was the copy of the limited power of attorney I had signed in September. Read it, Drew, I said. Read paragraph 4. Drew hesitated, then stepped forward. He leaned over the table. The room held its breath. Authority to conduct banking transactions necessary for maintenance of the household. Drew read aloud. His voice was shaky. Authority to receive and open mail. Authority to pay utility services. Keep going, I said. Find the clause that says real estate conveyance. Drew scanned the document. He flipped the page. He flipped it back. He looked up at Gordon, his eyes wide with betrayal. It is not here. Drew whispered. There is nothing here about selling the property because I didn't grant it, I said. That document allows my father to pay the water bill. It does not allow him to sell the roof over my head. Any deed he signed using this power of attorney is void. Any contract he entered into is fraudulent. And any money you gave him based on this paper. I let the sentence hang in the air. Gone. But the addendum, Piper blurted out. The room froze. Piper covered her mouth with her hand, but it was too late. The words were out. She stood there, her eyes darting between me and Gordon, realizing she had just handed me the smoking gun. I turned to her slowly. The addendum? I asked. What addendum? Piper. The one Dad signed. Piper stammered, her face flushing a deep blotchy red. At Mason's office last week, Mason said the original was too old, so they made an update to clarify things. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a prosecutor who just got a confession on the stand. You can't sign an addendum to a power of attorney for yourself, Piper, I said. My voice quiet and lethal. The principal me has to sign it. If Gordon signed an addendum granting himself more power without me present, without my signature, that is called forgery. And since Mason Klein notarized it, that is a felony conspiracy. Gordon slumped back against the wall. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He knew the law. He knew enough to know that Piper had just buried him. The guests were moving now. It wasn't a sudden rush, but a slow, uncomfortable retreat. People were putting down their drinks. They were finding their coats. The party was dissolving into the reality of a criminal investigation. Uncle Ted set his glass down on the mantelpiece with a sharp clink. He looked at Gordon with a mixture of pity and disgust. I think I'm going to go. Gordon, you have got a lot to explain. No. Wait, Gordon pleaded, reaching out. It is not like that. We were going to pay her back once Piper's settlement came in. We were going to make it right. With what settlement? I asked. The imaginary one. Or were you planning to use the money from the hard money loan you applied for tonight? Gordon flinched. He didn't know I knew about the hard money lender. The color drained from his face completely. I turned my attention back to the young couple. Drew looked sick. Leia looked terrified. They were holding a set of keys to a house that was a crime scene. and they had paid $40,000 for the privilege. Listen to me closely. I said to them. I am going to hand this file to the district attorney on Tuesday morning. I am going to report the notary, the agent, and the seller. If I were you, I would not spend the night in this house. And whoever wired that money, whoever put down that deposit. I leaned in, making sure Piper heard every syllable. You need to get a lawyer tonight because that money is likely already moving. And once it hits the offshore accounts Piper uses for her investments, you are never seeing it again. Drew dropped the keys. They hit the floor with a heavy jingle. He grabbed Leia's hand. We are leaving. We need to call my dad. He knows a judge. They turned to flee, pushing past the remaining guests toward the foyer. I watched them go. I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me, but I stood my ground. I wasn't done. I had cleared the room of the audience, but I still had the perpetrators to deal with. But as Drew and Leia were scrambling to get their coats, I saw Leia pull Drew close. She thought they were out of earshot. She thought the chaos covered her voice. But I was trained to hear cries for help in the wind, and I heard her whisper. Drew, Leia hissed, her voice shaking with a panic that went deeper than just losing a house. We can't call your dad. Why not? Drew whispered back, frantically, shoving his arm into his coat. We need legal help. We can't tell him about the deposit, Leia whispered. Because it wasn't our money. I went still. I focused entirely on them. What do you mean? Drew asked. The $40,000? Leia said, and her voice dropped to a terrifying whisper that carried across the quiet room like a draft. We didn't have $40,000. Drew. Piper gave it to us. My blood ran cold. She gave it to us, Drew asked, freezing with his hand on the doorknob. She loaned it to us, Leia whispered. She said she needed the sale to look legitimate on paper for the bank. She transferred the money to me last week and told me to wire it to the escrow company as the deposit. She said she got it from a private family trust. I looked at Piper. She was staring at the floor, her breathing shallow and fast. The twist hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't just stolen my equity. They had weaponized it. Piper had used the money she stole from my Helalock, the $20,000 and $50,000 transfers Talia had seen earlier, and she had funneled it to these fake buyers to create the deposit. She was buying my house with my own money. It was a wash trade. A circular fraud designed to trick a lender into releasing the full purchase price, or to show a valid sale to a hard money lender to get even more cash. Drew and Leia weren't just victims. They were mules. Piper, I said. My voice was no longer angry. It was just amazed. You funded the deposit with the stolen Helic money. Piper looked up. Her eyes were wild. Cornered. Dangerous. It is not stolen, she screamed, her voice cracking. It is leverage. That is how business works. Haley. You leverage assets to create liquidity. I was going to pay it all back once the token launched. I was going to buy you a better house. You bought your own sister's house with her own credit card, I said, shaking my head. And you got these two idiots to hold the bag. I looked at Drew and Leia. They were frozen at the door, realizing that their innocent buyer defense had just evaporated. They weren't buyers. They were accomplices in money laundering. Don't leave, I said to them. Drew put his hand on the doorknob. We didn't know. Don't leave, I repeated, pulling out my phone. Because if you walk out that door now, you are fleeing the scene of a felony. And unlike my family, I don't think you two are built for prison. I dialed the number for the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I held the phone up so they could all see the screen. Merry Christmas, I said. Nobody is going anywhere. Christmas morning in Cedar Hollow broke cold and gray. There was no sun to make the snow sparkle. Only a flat steel-cold light that made the world look like a black and white photograph. I did not wake up to the smell of pancakes or the sound of unwrapping paper. I woke up in the back seat of my rented Ford Expedition, parked in the lot of a 24-hour diner near the lake. I had not slept in the house. I could not sleep in a crime scene. And I certainly could not sleep under the same roof as the people who were actively trying to bankrupt me. I checked my watch. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I had sent a text to Drew and Leah Mercer at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was brief and professional. Meet me at the lakeside grind at 8:30. Bring every piece of paper Mason Klein gave you if you want to stay out of jail. Do not be late. I walked into the coffee shop. It was mostly empty, save for a few weary travelers and a barista who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. I ordered a black coffee and secured a booth in the back corner, far away from the windows. I placed my 3 binders on the table. They were color-coded now. Red for the timeline, blue for the bank records, black for the legal correspondence. I was not here to drink cocoa. I was here to recruit witnesses. Drew and Leah arrived exactly at 8:30. They looked terrible. Drew was wearing the same clothes he had worn the night before. His face pale and unshaven. Leah's eyes were swollen, red-rimmed from hours of crying. They did not look like the arrogant homeowners who had held my keys 12 hours ago. They looked like 2 kids who had wandered into a minefield. They slid into the booth opposite me. They did not order anything. "We didn't call Drew's dad," Leah said immediately, her voice a hoarse whisper. "We didn't call anyone. We were scared." "Good," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "Fear keeps you sharp. And right now you need to be very sharp." I opened the red binder. I spun it around so they could see the timeline I had constructed with Talia's help. "This is a map of the last 90 days, I said, my finger tracing the line. "Here is where I left for Alabama. Here is where the limited power of attorney was signed. Here is where the unauthorized helic was opened. And here is where you 2 enter the picture." I looked at Drew. "I am going to offer you a deal. It is not a legal deal because I am not a prosecutor yet. It is a survival deal. I am going to help you get your deposit back. I am going to help you untangle yourselves from this fraud so that when the police start issuing warrants, your names are on the witness list, not the defendant list." Drew nodded frantically. "Yet, please. We just want out. Then I need the truth," I said. "I need the parts you didn't say in front of my father last night." I tapped the table. "Tell me about Mason Klein. Why did you trust him? Why did you agree to close without title insurance?" Drew looked at Leah. She gave him a tiny, imperceptible nod. "Mason said it was a pocket listing," Drew said, wringing his hands. He said, "The family, your family, was in a financial crisis and needed cash immediately. He told us if we waited for the banks and the title companies to do their full due diligence, the house would go to foreclosure and we would lose the chance. He created urgency," I said. "Classic pressure tactic. He told us if we could wire the funds by Christmas Eve, he would knock $20,000 off the asking price." Drew continued. "But there was a condition. Let me guess." I said a fee. Drew swallowed hard. He asked for a consulting fee in cash. $5,000. He said it was to pay for the expedited legal review to bypass the standard waiting period. "Did you pay it?" I asked. "Yes," Drew whispered. "We gave him an envelope with $5,000 in $100 bills last Tuesday in his office." I pulled out my phone. I dialed Talia and put her on speaker. "Talia, are you listening? I am here." Talia's voice came through, sharp and clear. "Drew, this is Talia Voss, legal counsel for MS Jones. That $5,000 wasn't a consulting fee. It was a kickback. Mason Klein bribed you to bypass due diligence so you wouldn't find the liens he was hiding. That makes you participants in mortgage fraud." Leah made a small choke sound. "We didn't know he is a licensed agent. Ignorance is not a shield when you are handing over envelopes of cash," Talia said. But if you testify that Mason solicited that bribe, we can pin the conspiracy charge on him. Do you have a receipt? No, Drew said. He said it was off the books. Of course he did, I said. What about the deposit? The $40,000. Tell Talia what you told me last night. Piper gave it to us, Leah said, leaning into the phone. She transferred it to my personal Venmo in 4 transactions of $10,000, each over 2 days. She told us to wire it to the escrow company, so it looked like the money came from us. She said it was a way to help her sister out without hurting your pride. She said you wouldn't accept charity, so we had to pretend we were buying it with our own money. Got, Talia muttered on the line. She was laundering the Helilock money to create a fake paper trail for the sale. It is a wash trade. She used Haley's equity to buy Haley's house. I looked at them. I want you to send me screenshots of those Venmo transfers right now. I want the dates, the timestamps, and the transaction IDs. And I want you to write down every single text message sent you. We will. Drew said we have a moving truck booked for tomorrow. Half our stuff is already in your garage. Do not move anything in. I commanded. And do not take anything out. If you have a rental contract for the truck, keep it. Proves your intent was genuine. Even if the deal was rotten, it helps prove you were dupes, not masterminds. While Drew and Leah began forwarding evidence to my secure email, I opened my laptop. It was time to go on the offensive. I drafted a formal email to the escrow officer attaching the affidavit Talia had prepared. Subject notice of dispute. Escrow number 44921, 342. Maplewood Drive to the escrow officer. Be advised that the validity of the sale regarding the above property is formally disputed. The seller, Gordon Jones, acted without valid authority under a limited power of attorney that did not grant conveyance rights. Furthermore, the deposit funds were sourced from the seller's side, constituting potential money laundering. Any release of funds to Gordon Jones, Piper Jones, or Mason Klein will be considered negligence and will result in immediate legal action against your brokerage. I demand an immediate freeze on all funds. I hit send. Then I logged into the bank portal for the Helilock. I uploaded the police report number I had generated online in the middle of the night. I uploaded the dashboard camera footage showing me entering the house and confronting the parties. I uploaded the scans of my flight tickets proving I was in Alabama when the loan was notarized. Message to fraud department. The notary stamp on the loan documents is a forgery. The borrower was 12,200 m away. I am requesting an immediate internal investigation into the loan officer who approved this funding. I hit submit. My phone buzzed. It was a text message. Dad, Haley. Please. We need to talk. Just family. No lawyers. Meet me at the house. I can explain everything. I stared at the screen. Just family was the code he always used when he wanted to bypass logic and go straight for guilt. I replied. No meetings without counsel. Any communication goes through Talia Voss. Do not contact me directly. The phone buzzed again immediately. Dad, you are destroying your sister's life over money. We can fix this. Mason has a plan to refinance the debt. Just come home. Haley. I am home. It is you who is trespassing. I blocked his number. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long time. This was the man who had taught me to ride a bike. This was the man who had held me when my mother died. But looking at the timeline in the red binder, I realized that man was gone. The man texting me now was just an addict protecting his supply. Haley, Talia said on the speaker, check your email. We just got a love letter from Mason. I refreshed my inbox. There it was. An email from Mason Klein really group marked high importance. Joan. Your behavior last night was unacceptable and defamatory. You slandered my professional reputation in front of clients. If you do not cease these false allegations immediately and vacate the property to allow the lawful owners to take possession, I will be forced to file a lawsuit for defamation and tortious interference with the business contract. The deal is closed. You are currently squatting. Govern yourself accordingly. Mason Klein. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He is threatening to sue me for defamation. Standard bully tactic. Talia said he is trying to scare you into silence because he knows he is exposed. I am drafting a response now. It is called a litigation hold letter. It basically tells him that if he deletes a single email, text or file related to this transaction, he is committing expoliation of evidence. It is a federal offense. I am sending it to his broker, his licensing board, and his personal email. Send it, I said. And Haley, Talia added. I have been digging into Piper's partners, the one she claimed scammed her. The imaginary startup. I asked. It is not a startup, Talia said. I ran a trace on the checking account Piper used to transfer the money to Drew and Leia. I found a series of recurring payments going back 6 months. They are not to vendors. They are to an offshore gaming platform called High Stakes Trade. Gambling? I asked. Worse, Talia said. It is one of those binary option trading apps that is basically a casino disguised as a market. You bet on whether a stock goes up or down in the next 30 seconds. It is addictive. It is rigged. And it is unregulated. Piper has lost nearly $60,000 in the last 4 months. That matches the Helic withdrawals, I said. But here's the twist, Talia said. I looked into the shell company that processes payments for the app in Colorado. It is an LLC called Mountain View Holdings. I pulled the articles of incorporation. Who owns it? The registered agent is a corporate service, Talia said. But the mailing address for the LLC, it is Suite 204 at the Executive Plaza on Main Street. I froze. Talia. That is Mason Klein's office address. The pieces slammed together. He is not just the agent, I said. Realizing the scale of the trap. He is the bookie. He got Piper hooked on this trading app where he is running the local affiliate for it. She owes him money. He told her the only way to pay him back was to sell the house. And he brokered the sale. Talia finished. So he gets the commission on the sale. Plus he gets the debt repaid from the equity he helped her steal. He is double dipping on the destruction of your family. He groomed her, I said. He knew she was weak. He knew I was gone. He fed her the addiction and then offered her the knife to cut my throat. I looked up at Drew and Leia. They were watching me, terrified by the intensity of the conversation. Did Mason ever mention an app to you? I asked Drew. Did he ever talk about trading? He told us he made a killing in crypto. Drew said he told us he could show us how to double our money if we had some liquidity left over after the house purchase. He was going to do it to them, too. I told Talia. We have him. Talia said. This is racketeering. This is RICO territory if we can prove the pattern. But we need to lock down the evidence before he scrubs it. I am on it, I said. My phone chimed with a social media notification. It was from Instagram. I didn't follow Piper. But my account was tagged. Piper Jones Official just posted a story. I opened the application. It was a video of Piper. She was sitting in her car crying. The ring light reflected in her eyes. Hey guys, she sobbed into the camera. I don't usually do this. But I am just so heartbroken. My sister came home last night and kicked me out on Christmas after everything I have done to try and hold this family together. She is so obsessed with money. She doesn't care that our dad is sick with worry. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. The comments were already rolling in. Stay strong, Queen. Your sister sounds toxic. Drop her Venmo. We will help. I watched the video again. I wasn't looking at her tears. I was looking at the phone she was holding in her hand in the reflection of the car window. She had switched screens to show a proof of her financial struggle. It was a screenshot of her bank balance, a negative number in red. But because she was careless, because she was frantic, she hadn't cropped the top of the image. There at the very top of the screenshot was a notification banner appearing on her screen. Transfer received $50,000 from Iron Rock Capital. I hit pause. I zoomed in. The hard money loan. The one I had tried to stop. Talia, I said. My voice dead calm. Piper just posted a screenshot. The hard money loan from Iron Rock funded. She has $50,000 in her account right now. This morning they pushed it through, Talia said. Despite the freeze, Mason must have called in a favor, I said. Or he forged another document overnight. That money is going to disappear in an hour, Talia warned. She's going to transfer it to Mason or the trading app. Not if I get to her first, I said. I stood up. I grabbed the binders. Drew Leia. I said. Go to the police station. Ask for Detective Miller. He is the one who handles fraud. Tell him everything you told me. Show him the Venmo transfers. Where are you going? Drew asked. I am going to find my sister. I said she thinks she is the victim of a story. I am going to show her the ending. I walked out of the coffee shop. The snow had stopped, but the air was colder than ever. I had the truth now. Mason Klein wasn't just a shady agent. He was a predator who had eaten my family from the inside out. And now he had $50,000 of my equity sitting in my sister's account waiting to be washed. I got into the truck. I didn't drive to the police station. I drove to the one place I knew Piper went when she needed to feel important. I drove to the Executive Plaza on Main Street, Suite 204. The phone call from the bank came at 10 o'clock in the morning. Just as I was pulling away from the Executive Plaza. The voice on the other end was not the tired operator from the night before, but a senior fraud investigator named Mr. Henderson. Joan, he said. His tone dry and clipped. We have placed a temporary administrative freeze on the home equity line of credit associated with your property. No further disbursements will be allowed out, and we have flagged the $50,000 transfer sent this morning for clawback. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Thank you. What is the next step? The freeze is only good for 72 hours, Henderson said. To make it permanent and to discharge the debt from your name, we need a sworn affidavit of forgery. We also need a copy of the police report and a formal statement regarding the power of attorney abuse. If we do not have these documents by close of business on Tuesday, the system may automatically lift the freeze. You will have them today, I said. I drove straight to the police station. Talia met me there. Not in person, but digitally. I sat in the lobby with my laptop open, uploading files to the portal while Talia walked me through the specific language for the complaint. We weren't just filing a report for a stolen credit card. We were filing a complex dossier. We filed for identity theft against the unknown person who accessed my online banking. We filed for forgery regarding the power of attorney addendum. We filed for financial elder abuse, not against Gordon, but implicating that he was being coerced, which was a strategic move Talia suggested to force the police to look at the wider circle, specifically Mason Klein. By noon, I had a case number that was actually being taken seriously. The detective, a man named Miller, who looked like he had seen too many domestic disputes turn violent, took the binder of evidence. He looked at the wash trading pattern Talia had uncovered, and he looked at the connection to Mason Klein's office. This is not just a family squabble, Miller said, tapping the file. This is wire fraud. We will need to bring your father in for questioning. I know, I said. The words tasted like ash. Do what you have to do. I drove back to the house. The snow had stopped, but the wind was picking up, whipping the powder into blinding swirls. When I turned onto my street, I saw a familiar car parked in front of my driveway. It was my father's 10-year-old Buick. The engine was running. I could see the exhaust puffing into the gray air. I pulled the Expedition in behind him, effectively blocking him in. I didn't pull into the garage. I didn't want to be trapped inside. I walked up to the driver's side window of his car. Gordon looked terrible. He was wearing the same coat he had worn at the party, but now it looked too big for him. His face was gray, covered in unshaven stubble. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. He rolled down the window. The heat from the car blasted out, smelling of stale coffee and fear. "Haley," he said. His voice was cracked. "I have been waiting for 2 hours. I didn't want to go to the door. I didn't want to intrude. You sold the door." "Dad," I said, standing in the cold. "You don't get to worry about intruding now. Please," he said. Tears welled up in his eyes, but I felt nothing. My empathy reserves had been drained. "You have to stop this." The police called Piper. They called Mason. "You are going to send your sister to prison." Piper sent herself to prison when she stole my identity. I said, "I am just filing the paperwork." "She didn't mean it," Gordon pleaded. He gripped the steering wheel. "She was desperate. She got mixed up with bad people. Mason said he could fix it. He said if we just moved some money around, we could pay off her debts and then buy the house back before you even came home. We were going to fix it. Haley. We were doing it for her. You were doing it to me." I corrected. "You weren't saving her. You were feeding her addiction. And you were using my life as the food. I can't lose her. Haley." He sobbed. "She is all I have left." The words hit me hard. "She is all I have left." He didn't even realize what he had said. He didn't realize that I was standing right there. His other daughter. The one who paid his bills. The one who fixed his roof. The one who had never asked him for a dime. In his mind, I was just the resource. Piper was the child. "Go home." "Gordon," I said. "Haley. Please. I am giving you one choice," I said, my voice cutting through the wind. "If you want any leniency, any hope that I don't push for the maximum sentence against you personally, you need to pick a side right now." He stared at me, blinking. "I want every email you exchanged with Mason clean," I said. "I want every text message Piper sent you about the money. I want the original power of attorney document you signed. If you give me the evidence that proves Mason orchestrated this, I will tell the district attorney that you were manipulated. If you protect them, you go down with them. I can't betray her." He whispered. "You already betrayed me," I said. "Now you are just deciding if you want to die in a cell." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I heard him calling my name, but I kept walking until I was inside the house. I locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. Then I leaned against the wood and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. I didn't cry. I just checked the security camera feed on my phone to make sure he was leaving. He sat there for another 20 minutes. Then slowly, the Buick pulled away. The silence of the house was short-lived. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my personal cell phone began to vibrate. It started with Aunt Linda. "Haley. How could you? Piper is hysterical. She says you are making up lies to steal the inheritance." Then Cousin Steve. "Hey, cool it with the lawyers. Family settles things at the table, not in court." Then a number I didn't recognize. Probably one of Piper's friends. "You are a toxic narcissist. Give her the money back." Piper had launched a campaign. She knew she couldn't win on the facts. So, she was trying to win on noise. She was calling everyone we knew, spinning a story where I was the greedy, absent sister who came back to crush the struggling, entrepreneurial sibling. I didn't engage. I didn't reply to explain my side. I didn't defend myself. I opened my settings. Block contact. Block contact. Block contact. I moved through the list with the efficiency of a surgeon removing necrotic tissue. I blocked my aunt. I blocked my cousins. I blocked the random numbers. Talia, I said, calling her on the secure line. Piper is rallying the flying monkeys. I am getting threats. Screenshot them. Talia said we are adding harassment to the file. And Haley, I am filing a request for a temporary protection order against Piper and Gordon. If they come within 100 yards of the house, they go to jail immediately. No trial needed. Do it. I said. I want the paper shield. By 4 o'clock, the tide began to turn. Drew and Leah Mercer met me at the house. They didn't come inside. They stood on the porch, shivering, holding a folder. We went to the police. Drew said. He looked exhausted. We talked to Detective Miller. We gave him the Venmo records. And I asked him we signed this. Leah said, handing me the folder. It was an affidavit of facts. In it, they swore under penalty of perjury that Mason Klein had solicited a cash bribe, that Piper Jones had funded the deposit, and that they had been instructed to conceal the source of funds. We're sorry, Leah said, her voice small. We really thought we were helping. You were helpful today, I said, taking the folder. I will tell the bank that you are cooperating. It might help you get your money back from the escrow before the government seizes it. Thank you. Drew said. We are going to go stay with my parents in Ohio. Good idea, I said. They left. I had turned the enemies into witnesses. Now I only had the mastermind left. 5:30. Talia forwarded me an email she had received from the State Real Estate Commission. Subject emergency hearing notice Lindsay Mason Clean. Based on the evidence submitted regarding the unauthorized HELIC disbursement and the allegations of title fraud, the board has scheduled an emergency suspension hearing for Wednesday morning. Mr. Clean is required to produce his transaction file immediately. He is cooked, Talia said on the phone. The board doesn't mess around with trust fund violations. Once they saw the evidence that he was double-dipping acting as the agent and the lender's broker, they expedited it. He is going to lose his license before the week is out. He knows it. I said he hasn't responded to my litigation hold letter. He is probably shredding documents right now, Talia said. But it doesn't matter. The bank trail is digital. He can shred paper. But he can't shred the blockchain ledgers of that gambling app. I spent the evening sitting in my living room, the one that was supposed to be empty. I had moved the furniture back to where it belonged. I had taken down the sold sign from the front yard and thrown it in the trash. I was scrolling through the local marketplace listings on my laptop, looking for evidence of other assets Piper might be liquidating. I knew her pattern. When she was cornered, she sold things. I found them. Designer handbags. Urgent sale. Cash only. Professional camera gear. Like new. Must go tonight. She was selling the props of her fake life. But as I clicked through the seller profile, I saw something else. The comments on her seller ratings were new and they were angry. User took payment but never shipped. Scammer. Do not buy. She owes me $300. The creditors weren't just banks. They were people she had grifted in small ways. The wall she had built was collapsing from 1,000 small cracks. It wasn't just the house. She had burned bridges I didn't even know existed. I closed the laptop. I was done for the day. I had frozen the money. I had filed the charges. I had secured the house. I poured myself a glass of water and walked to the window. The street was dark. The snow was piling up again. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, but it was a clean loneliness. It was better than the crowded deception of the night before. Then my computer pinged. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a standard email. It was a message sent through the contact form on my professional website, the one I used for emergency management consulting. It bypassed my personal filters. I walked back to the desk and opened it. The sender was anonymous. The subject line was 342 Maplewood. I opened the message. Joan. I saw the police cruiser at your house today. I assume you figured out the Helix scam. You need to know that you are not special. Piper didn't come up with this. Mason didn't just do this for her. Check the property records for 118 Oak Street, 409 Cedar Lane, and the ranch property out on Highway 9. Same agent. Same family transfer method. Same lender. The owners were all elderly or out of town. They all lost their homes. Piper is just the latest recruiting tool he used to get inside. She is not the first. There are 3 others. Watch your back. He is not just a realtor. He is a cleaner. I stared at the screen. The text blurred for a second, then snapped into sharp focus. This wasn't just a story about a greedy sister and a weak father. This wasn't just a domestic drama. I had stumbled into a localized organized crime ring. Mason Klein was targeting specific properties' vulnerable owners, absentee owners, and using family members or distress as the wedge to strip the equity. My house was just unit number 4. I picked up the phone to call Talia, but my hand hesitated. I looked out the window again. The darkness seemed deeper now. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting a machine that had done this before and succeeded. I saved the email. I printed it. And then for the first time since I came home, I went to the gun safe in the master bedroom closet to check if my father had sold that, too. He hadn't. It was there. I took it out. I wasn't taking any chances. Mason Klein was a cleaner, and I was the stain he needed to remove. The anonymous email had changed the texture of the room. It was no longer just my living room. It was a command center in a war against a predator who had been hunting in my town for years. I spent the hours after midnight sitting on the floor surrounded by the binders, my laptop screen glowing with the harsh white light of public record databases. Talia was on video chat, her face pale, but her eyes sharp. She had taken the anonymous tip about the other addresses, 118 Oak Street, 409 Cedar Lane, and run with it. She wasn't sleeping either. Haley. Look at this, Talia said, holding up a printout to her camera. I pulled the transaction history for the other 3 properties mentioned in that email. They all followed the exact same pattern. Distress seller. Quick cash close. And this is the key. They all use the same settlement agent. Not a major title company. I asked. No. Talia said. A small outfit called Summit Creek Escrow. It is a 2-person operation in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. And guess who the primary agent on all those deals was? Mason Klein. I said. Correct. Talia said. But it gets worse. I looked up the disciplinary records for Summit Creek Escrow. They have been flagged twice for failure to record liens in timely manners. Basically, they sit on the paperwork just long enough for the money to move, then claim administrative error when the debts show up later. It is a churn and burn operation. So, Mason finds the victims, I said. Piecing it together. He finds families with weak links. A gambling addict like Piper or a senile parent. He convinces them to sell fast for cash to solve the problem. He pushes the deal through Summit Creek so no one checks the title too closely, and by the time the real owner figures it out, the equity is stripped and the house is sold to a third party. Exactly. Talia said. And I found something else. I did a background check on Mason's finances. He isn't just greedy. Haley. He is broke. I leaned closer to the screen. He drives a Porsche. He wears Italian suits. Leased and fake. Talia said he has a judgment against him from a lawsuit in 2020. A previous client sued him for negligence. He was ordered to pay $85,000. The payment deadline was wait for it December 1st of this year. I looked at my red binder at the timeline I had constructed. Piper started asking me for loans in late October. I said Mason listed my house on December 1st. The timeline matches perfectly. He wasn't helping my family out of the goodness of his heart. He was liquidating my assets to pay his own court judgment. He needed a big score to stay out of jail himself. Talia said he saw Piper coming a mile away. He probably groomed her, fed her the gambling addiction, and then offered her the solution that just happened to solve his problem. 2. We need to follow the money, I said. If he is using Piper to wash the funds, there has to be a transfer from her back to him. I opened the folder containing the screenshots of Piper's bank activity, the one she had foolishly exposed in her social media video. Combined with the partial statements I had subpoenaed through the fraud alert, I traced the path of the home equity line of credit funds. The bank had released $20,000 initially. It went to my account, then was transferred to Piper via the hijacked online access from Piper's account. It didn't go to creditors. It didn't go to a startup. Here it is, I said, my finger hovering over the line item. November 15th. A wire transfer for $12,000. The recipient is MK Consulting Group. MK. Talia said. Mason Klein. And here's another one, I said, scanning down. December 2nd. $5,000 to Summit Creek Services. That is the escrow company. He is paying them kickbacks for my equity to rush the paperwork. That is money laundering, Talia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Haley. We have him. We have the full circle. He stole the equity, filtered it through your sister, and paid himself consulting fees to cover his debts. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. It was different from the anger I felt toward my father. This was hatred. Mason Klein had looked at my family and seen a piggy bank he could smash open. I need to nail Gordon down. I said he is still claiming he didn't know about the Helic. He is playing the confused old man card. If he sticks to that story, Mason might be able to claim Gordon tricked him. Gordon signed the documents. Talia reminded me. He says he signed a stack of papers and didn't read them. I said, I need to prove he knew exactly what he was signing. I picked up my phone. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, but I knew my father wouldn't be sleeping. I sent a text message. Haley. I am looking at the signature page of the Helic application. It is dated November 10th. You signed it as POA. Below your signature, there is an email address listed for contact. It is not mine. It is yours. I waited. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Gordon, I told you. Mason handled the paperwork. He just told me where to sign. I thought it was for the bridge loan to help Piper. Haley. A bridge loan is a mortgage. Dad, you told everyone at the party you didn't know about the debt. You lied. Gordon. I didn't lie. I just didn't understand the terms. Haley. Then prove it. I want you to forward me every single email you have ever received from Mason Klein right now. If you claim you were tricked, the evidence is in those emails. But let me give you a warning. Dad, I have already filed a litigation hold request with your service provider. If you delete a single email before forwarding it, the forensic team will find it and you will be charged with spoliation of evidence. That is a felony. Do not hit delete. Hit forward. I stared at the screen, waiting. I was bluffing about the service provider. I hadn't served them yet. But Gordon didn't know that he was a man who operated on fear. And I was terrified he would protect Piper by destroying the truth. 10 minutes passed. My phone sat silent on the floorboards. Then a notification pinged. New email from Gordon Jones. FDDokyun. Financing agreement. New email from Gordon Jones. Strategy for quick close. New email from Gordon Jones. Fun Piper situation. He was folding. He was choosing self-preservation. I opened the email titled Strategy for Quick Close. It was dated November 5th. From Mason Klein to Gordon Jones Gordon. I know you are worried about Haley finding out, but we can structure this as a helilock first. It gives us liquidity immediately without triggering a title change alert that she might see online. We can say it is for emergency home repairs if the bank asks. Once we get the cash, we pay off Piper's urgent debts. Then we list the house and sell it to pay off the helilock before Haley gets back in January. She will never know the loan existed. We just need to move fast. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs. He knew. I said to Talia. He knew exactly what the helilock was. Mason explicitly told him it was a way to hide the activity from me. She will never know. That was the plan. Gordon isn't a victim, Talia said, her voice hard. He is a co-conspirator. He sacrificed me, I said quietly. He was willing to gamble my entire financial future on a 3-month timeline just to clean up Piper's mess. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't Gordon this time. It was Drew Mercer. Do we found the texts? Sending them now. A series of screenshots flooded my inbox. It was a conversation between Drew and Mason Klein from the week before the closing. Drew. Hey, Mason. My dad's lawyer friend said we should really get title insurance, especially since it is a private sale. Mason. Drew. Buddy. Listen. Title insurance takes 2 weeks to underwrite. We don't have 2 weeks. The seller has another cash offer on the table from an investor in California. If you want this house, we have to close by Christmas Eve. I have checked the title myself. It is clean. I am saving you $2,000 in fees. Trust me. I do this every day. Drew. Okay. But you are sure it is clean? Mason 100%. I pulled the abstract myself. No liens. Just sign the waiver. Got him. Talia said when I read it to her. He lied in writing. He told the buyer there were no liens when he had personally facilitated the helilock lien 3 weeks earlier. That is fraud in the end. That is criminal fraud. We have enough. I said we have the pattern. We have the money trail. We have the confession in the emails. We have the lies to the buyers. I will draft the supplemental filing for the district attorney. Talia said. Go get some sleep. Haley. You have one. But I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was a toxic chemical in my blood. At 7 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it. Haley. It was Piper. Her voice sounded small, thin, like a child who had broken a vase. What do you want? Piper, I asked. I saw the police report. She sniffled. Dad told me you filed charges. Haley, you can't put me in jail. I am your sister. You are an identity thief who happens to share my DNA. I said. Where is the $50,000 from Iron Rock? I don't have it all. She stammered. I had to pay some people. But listen. I have a plan, Mason said. If we just calm down, we can work something out. I can get a job. I can pay you back. We can split the loss. Haley 50-50. Just drop the charges and we will handle it as a family loan. I laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that hurt my throat. Split the loss? I asked. You stole my equity. You forged my signature. And you tried to sell my home out from under me. And your offer is that I assume 50% of your crime. It is not a crime. Piper shrieked, losing her composure. It was a mistake. I was trying to invest. I was trying to help. Why are you always so selfish? You have everything. You have a career. You have the house. You have perfect credit. Why can't you just absorb this for me? It is just money to you. It is my life. Piper. I said. I worked double shifts in disaster zones for that money. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I slept in tents. You didn't steal money. You stole my time. You stole my safety. I will tell everyone you agreed to it. Piper threatened, her voice turning vicious. I will tell them you are lying to commit insurance fraud. Mason will back me up. Dad will back me up. Dad already forwarded me the emails. Piper, I said. He gave you up to save himself. He sent me the thread where Mason planned the whole thing to hide it from me. It is over. There was a silence on the line. A long, terrified silence. He wouldn't. Piper whispered. He did, I said. Because at the end of the day, Gordon loves Gordon more than he loves either of us. You should have known that. I hung up. I walked into the kitchen. The morning sun was finally breaking through the clouds, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor. I felt empty. I had won the tactical battle, but the emotional landscape was scorched earth. My phone rang again. I assumed it was Piper calling back to scream or Gordon calling to apologize. I almost didn't answer. But the caller ID said Granite Ridge Security Fraud Depot Clearance Checks. I answered. This is Haley. Jones. A brisk voice said. This is a courtesy verification call from the Identity Protection Bureau. We received a credit inquiry regarding your Social Security number 10 minutes ago that triggered a velocity alert. What inquiry? Asked, gripping the counter. I froze my credit yesterday. Yes, Mom. And thank God you did, the officer said. Because at 8:15 this morning, an application was submitted to an online auto title lender in Nevada. Someone tried to borrow $60,000 using your passport information and your home deed as collateral. $60,000? I whispered. The application was denied because of the freeze you placed. The officer continued. But I have to tell you. Joan. They had everything. They had your full passport scan. They had the deed. They even had a digital signature that was a 99% match to yours. If you hadn't placed that freeze yesterday afternoon, if you had waited even 12 hours, the money would be gone. I said it would have been wired out instantly. The officer said it was a same-day funding request. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking uncontrollably now. It wasn't over. Even while I was gathering evidence, even while the walls were closing in, Mason and Piper had tried one last time. They had tried to fire one final bullet into my financial head before the ship went down. They weren't negotiating. They weren't sorry. They were trying to cash out before the handcuffs clicked. If I had slept in. If I had listened to Gordon's plea to wait and talk. If I hadn't listened to Talia's warning to freeze everything immediately, I would have lost another $60,000 this morning. I looked at the house around me. It felt fragile. I realized then that I wasn't safe just because I was home. I was only safe because I'd been faster than them. I picked up the phone and dialed the detective. Miller, he answered. They just tried again, I said. My voice steady and cold. 10 minutes ago. Attempted wire fraud in Nevada. They aren't stopping. Detective. You need to go pick them up now. We are dispatching a unit to the Executive Plaza, Miller said. NMS. Joan. We are sending a car to your sister's apartment, too. Good. I said. Don't knock. Just kick the door in. That is what she did to me. The hearing before the State Real Estate Commission took place on a Wednesday morning in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. It was not a courtroom. But the tension was just as lethal. I sat on one side of the mahogany table next to Talia. On the other side sat Mason Clean and his attorney, a man with a comb-over who kept checking his watch as if he had a tea time to catch. Mason looked diminished without the dim lighting of a bar or the flattering angles of a listing photo. He looked exactly like what he was, a desperate man in a cheap suit trying to talk his way out of a trap he had built himself. My client acted in good faith, Mason's lawyer began. His voice bored. He was facilitating a transaction for a family in distress. He relied on the representations of the father, Gordon Jones, who held a valid power of attorney. Mr. Clean is a victim of a domestic dispute that has spilled over into his professional sphere. The board members, three stern-faced individuals who had likely seen every variation of real estate fraud in the state, did not look sympathetic. The chairperson, a woman with gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked over her spectacles at Mason. Mr. Clean, she said, you are accused of facilitating a sale without proper title search, ignoring a recorded lien and dual agency violations regarding the financing. Did you or did you not advise the buyers to waive title insurance? Mason cleared his throat. I suggested that for speed. They could waive it. It is an option on the contract. It was their choice. Because you told them the title was clean, I said. I didn't shout. I just slid a piece of paper across the table. Talia took over. This is an email dated December 12th. From Mason Klein to Drew Mercer. I have checked the title myself. It is clean. 100% no liens. And Talia paused for effect. At the time this email was sent, there was a $150,000 home equity line of credit active on the property. A line of credit that Mr. Klein's own brokerage helped facilitate through a hard money referral. Mason shifted in his chair. I might have missed the update on the recorder's website. The county is slow. And here, Talia continued, sliding another document across the smooth wood, is an email from you to Gordon Jones, dated 2 days prior to the listing. Quote, we need to close this in 10 to 12 days before Haley gets back. If we skip the inspection and the insurance, we can beat the clock. Just tell her it is a bridge loan if she asks. End quote. The room went silent. The chairperson picked up the email. She read it once, then looked at Mason. Her expression went from skepticism to disgust. You were coaching the seller on how to conceal the transaction from the owner of record, the chairperson said. That is not negligence, Mr. Clean. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. Mason's lawyer stopped checking his watch. He closed his folder. It was the universal gesture of legal surrender. He knew the ship was sinking and he wasn't going down with it. I looked at Mason. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the table, his hands trembling slightly. He knew it was over. His license wasn't just going to be suspended. It was going to be incinerated. But I wasn't done. I walked out of the hearing room and into the hallway. My father was sitting on a bench, his head in his hands. He hadn't been called into the room, but he had been subpoenaed to be available. He looked up when I exited. His eyes were red-rimmed and fearful. Did it go okay? He asked, his voice shaking. It went exactly how it had to go, I said. Mason is finished. And because he is finished, he's going to start talking. He is going to tell them everything about how you signed those papers. Dad. Gordon stood up, wringing his hands. Haley, you have to stop this. The bank called me this morning. They are talking about criminal charges. They said I signed a fraudulent loan application. They said I could go to prison for 30 years. Bank fraud is a federal crime. I said simply, and since you used the mail to send the documents, that is mail fraud. 2. I did it for Piper. Cried. His voice echoing in the sterile corridor. She was in trouble. Real trouble. These people she owes money to, they aren't banks. Haley, they hurt people. I was scared for her life. So, you decided to ruin mine. I said, I thought we could pay it back. He pleaded. I thought if we sold the house, paid the debts, and then maybe you would understand. We are family. Family forgives. Family doesn't steal $250,000 from you while you are sleeping in a disaster zone. I said. And family doesn't sell your home to pay off a gambling debt. It wasn't gambling. Gordon insisted, clinging to the lie Piper had fed him. It was investment. She was unlucky. It was an app. Dad, I said, pulling out my phone. I showed him the screenshot Talia had found the transfer records to the offshore gaming platform. High-stakes trade. It is a casino on a phone. She lost $60,000 in 3 weeks. She wasn't investing. She was betting on whether the price of gold would go up or down in 30-second intervals. She is an addict and you are her enabler. Gordon stared at the screen. The reality finally seemed to pierce through his denial. He slumped back against the wall, the fight draining out of him. She told me it was crypto, he whispered. She told me it was the future. She lied, I said. And because you wanted to believe her. Because you always want to be the hero who saves her. You let her drag you into a felony. I turned to leave. But he grabbed my arm. His grip was weak. Trembling. Haley. Please, he begged. Do it for your mother. Think about Mom. She would be heartbroken to see us like this. She would want you to show mercy. She would want you to save your sister. I stopped. The mention of my mother was a tactical error. He thought it was a key to my heart. But he didn't realize he had just put the wrong key in the lock and snapped it off. I pulled my arm away from his grip. I looked him in the eye. And for the first time in years, I saw him clearly. Not as my father, but as a weak man who had spent his life choosing the path of least resistance. Mom worked double shifts at the diner to buy that house, I said. My voice low and dangerous. She saved every tip in a jar on the counter. She paid for that house with her swollen ankles and her aching back. She taught me that you never spend what you don't have. I stepped closer to him. Mom would not sell her home to buy silence for a liar, I said. And she certainly wouldn't ask me to set myself on fire to keep Piper warm. Don't you ever use her name to justify your cowardice again. I walked away. The sound of my heels clicking on the tile floor was the only sound in the hallway. I didn't look back. While the legal noose was tightening around Mason and Gordon, Piper was fighting a different war. She was fighting for her reputation and she was losing. She had barricaded herself in her apartment, or rather the apartment she was months behind on rent for. She couldn't attack me in court because the evidence was overwhelming. So, she attacked me on the only battlefield she understood. The internet. She posted a new video that afternoon. She was wearing no makeup, dressed in a hoodie, sitting on her floor. My sister has hired high-powered lawyers to crush me. She wept into the camera. She is twisting everything. I tried to help our dad with his retirement, and now she's accusing me of fraud. She has always been jealous of me. She can't stand that I'm free-spirited. She wants to control everyone. It might have worked a week ago, but the internet is a brutal place and the truth has a way of leaking out. I watched the comments roll in real time. User 123. Wait, isn't there a public court filing about a Hellolock fraud? I just looked up the case number from the other thread. Cedar Hollow Local. I know your dad. He told my uncle at the bowling alley that you lost 50 grand on a trading app. Is that true? Truthseeker 9. Post the receipts. Then show us the retirement investments. Bet you can't. Piper was deleting comments as fast as she could, but she couldn't stop the tide. Then the knockout blow came from an unexpected source. Drew and Leah Mercer filed their lawsuit. It wasn't a quiet filing. Their lawyer, a shark Talia had recommended, issued a press release. Couple sues local influencer and agent for real estate fraud scheme. Claims of stolen deposit and money laundering. The headline hit the local news feed at 4 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, Piper's comment section was a war zone. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain of a viral local news story. You stole their deposit. That is low. My grandma lost her house to Mason Klein. 2. You were working with him. Unfollowing. This is gross. Piper went private. Then she deactivated her account. The silence that followed was deafening. Her entire identity, built on filters and lies, had evaporated in an afternoon. But the silence didn't last. By 6 o'clock, the investigators were knocking on her door. I wasn't there. But Talia got the report from Detective Miller. They had served a warrant for her bank records. They brought forensic accountants. They sat her down at her own kitchen table and laid out the spreadsheets. They asked her about the transfers to Drew Mercer. Talia told me over the phone that evening. They asked her where the $40,000 came from. What did she say? I asked. I was sitting on my porch watching the sun go down over the snowy lawn that was legally mine again, though it felt tainted. She cracked. Talia said. She started crying. She said Mason told her to do it. She said Mason promised her that if she cycled the money, it would look like a legitimate sale and the bank would release the full mortgage amount and she could pay back the helilock before you noticed. She admitted to the structuring. I said. That is money laundering. She didn't stop there. Talia said when they pressed her on the signature, the forged POA addendum, she panicked. She realized Mason wasn't in the room to protect her. So, she threw Gordon under the bus. She blamed Dad. She told them, I didn't sign it. Dad signed it. He is the power of attorney. He told me it was okay. I just did what my dad told me to do. I closed my eyes. Or, she did. Piper had never taken responsibility for a broken plate in her life. She certainly wasn't going to take responsibility for a broken law. She would sacrifice the man who had destroyed his life to save hers. So Gordon is going to take the fall for the forgery, I said. Unless he flips on her, Talia said. But based on what you told me about their dynamic, he will probably let her bury him. He thinks he is being a martyr, I said bitterly. He thinks he is saving his little girl. He doesn't realize she is the one pushing him off the cliff. The next morning, I received a notification from the court. The final hearing for the title dispute and the fraud charges was set for Friday. It was going to be the deciding moment. The judge would rule on the validity of the deed, the status of the liens, and the criminal referrals. Talia came over to the house to prep. She brought a bottle of wine, but we didn't open it. We sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the wreckage of my family's betrayal. We have a strong case. Haley, Talia said. We have the emails. We have the bank records. We have Drew and Leia's testimony. We have Mason's license suspension. It is not enough, I said. Talia looked at me, surprised. What do you mean? It is a slam dunk. It is enough to win the house back, I said. It is enough to get the civil judgment. But Mason is slippery. He is already trying to cut a deal, claiming he was just a negligent agent, not a criminal mastermind. And Piper plays the victim so well that a jury might go easy on her. They might see her as a confused girl who made bad choices. I stood up and walked to the safe in the corner of the room, the one place in the house neither Gordon nor Piper knew the combination to. I need them to see the whole picture, I said. I need them to see that this wasn't a mistake. It was a lifestyle. I opened the safe. Inside, tucked behind my passport and my emergency cash was a small black hard drive. What is that? Talia asked before I left for Alabama. I said. Holding the drive in my hand, I installed a localized backup for the house's digital network. Not just the Wi-Fi logs. Everything. The smart home hub. The security audio. The keystroke logs from the desktop computer in the study that I let Piper use. You logged her keystrokes? Talia asked. Her eyes widening. I work in security. Talia. I said. I trust. But I verify. I never looked at it because I never had a reason to. I trusted them. And now? And now I have the logs from the night of December 1st. I said the night the notice of intent to sell was drafted. I plugged the drive into my laptop. I pulled up the audio file from the living room security sensor, the one disguised as a smoke detector. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. Mason's voice. "Don't worry about Haley. If she makes a fuss when she gets back, we just tell her the market crashed and we had to sell to save her credit. She is soft. She will believe it." Piper's voice. "She is not soft. Mason. She is annoying. But I can cry. If I cry, Dad will make her sign anything." Gordon's voice. "I don't like lying to her. Mason. Is there no other way?" Mason's voice. "Gordon. Look at the numbers. You want Piper to go to jail for that bad check she wrote? Or do you want to sell the house? Choose." Gordon's voice. "Okay. Show me where to sign." Talia stared at the computer. "You have them on tape plotting the conspiracy. You have them admitting that the financial crisis was actually a bad check." Piper wrote. "I haven't given this to Detective Miller yet," I said. "And I haven't put it in the discovery file for Mason's lawyer." "Why?" Talia asked. "Because I want to save it for the hearing," I said. "I want Mason to stand up there and lie one more time. I want Piper to give her soba story to the judge. I want Gordon to try and fall on his sword." I looked at the waveform on the screen, the visual representation of their betrayal, and then I said, "I want to play this. I want to watch their faces when they realize I was in the room with them the whole time. It is an ambush." Talia said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Legally, we have to disclose it as rebuttal evidence. But if we time it right, we time it for the kill shot," I said. I ejected the drive. I held it tight in my hand. It was cold, hard, and heavy. Felt like justice. "Friday," I said. We closed the file. The final hearing took place on a Friday morning in courtroom 4B. It was not the dramatic high-ceiling arena I had seen in movies. It was a functional fluorescent lit room that smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. The snow was still falling outside, pressing against the narrow windows, but inside the air was dry and hot. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Talia. On the other side of the aisle sat the people who used to be my family, and the man who had orchestrated their destruction. Mason Klein looked remarkably confident. He was wearing a navy suit that looked expensive from a distance but cheap up close. He was leaning back in his chair, whispering to his lawyer, a smirk playing on his lips. He clearly believed that the power of attorney document was his golden shield. He thought he had a legal loophole that would categorize this entire disaster as a misunderstanding or a civil dispute rather than a crime. Piper sat next to him. She had dressed for the occasion as if it were a red carpet event. She wore a modest black dress, pearl earrings, and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. It was a costume designed to scream innocent victim, but her eyes were darting around the room, frantic and hollow. She was checking her phone under the table every 30 seconds, likely deleting more comments from her imploding social media channels. Gordon sat on the far end of the bench. He looked small. He looked old. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge, the Honorable Justice Vance, was a woman who clearly had no patience for theatrics. She shuffled the stack of files on her desk and looked over her glasses. "We are here to review the emergency motion for injunctive relief and the preliminary findings regarding the title dispute for the property at 342 Maplewood Drive," Judge Vance said. "Mr. Klein's counsel, you may proceed." Mason's lawyer stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of seller's remorse. My client, Mr. Klein, acted as the listing agent based on a valid power of attorney provided by Mr. Gordon Jones. The family agreed to sell the home to cover emergency debts. Haley Jones is now trying to renege on that agreement because she is unhappy with the financial outcome. But the documents are clear. The sale to Mr. and Mrs. Mercer was legal. The financing was legal. Mason nodded, his smirk widening. The defense rests on the power of attorney, the judge said, turning to us. Boss. Talia stood up. She didn't button her jacket. She didn't posture. She simply picked up the red binder we had spent all night finalizing. Your Honor, Talia said, her voice cool and sharp. The defense is correct that a power of attorney exists. However, they are relying on a fraudulent addendum to that document, and today we are going to prove that the notarization on that addendum was a fabrication. The smirk fell off Mason's face. Talia walked to the witness stand. I call Sarah Jenkins to the stand. A woman in the back row stood up. She looked terrified. She was the notary public whose stamp appeared on the addendum that supposedly gave Gordon the right to sell my house. Talia waited for her to be sworn in. M. Jenkins, Talia began. Please look at Exhibit C. Is that your notary stamp and signature on the document titled General Power of Attorney Addendum? Yes, the woman whispered. And what is the date next to your signature? December 5th, she said. December 5th. Talia repeated. Now, Jenkins. The law requires that for a notarization to be valid, the signer must be physically present before you. Did Gordon Jones appear before you on December 5th to sign this document? The woman hesitated. She looked at Mason. Mason glared at her. A silent threat in his eyes. Remind the witness she is under oath. Judge Vance cut in her voice like a whip. No. Ms. Jenkins said. Her voice trembling. He didn't. A murmur went through the room. Who brought you the document? Jenkins. Talia asked. Mason. She said, pointing a shaking finger at the defense table. Mr. Clean brought it to my office. He said Gordon had already signed it. He said they were in a rush. He said he would send me more business if I just stamped it. I didn't think it was a big deal. He said it was just a formality for a family loan. So you notarized a signature you did not witness at the direction of the real estate agent who stood to profit from the transaction? Talia asked. Yet. She whispered. I am sorry. Objection. Mason's lawyer shouted. This is hearsay. Overruled. Judge Vance said. She looked at Mason. This is establishing a pattern of conduct. Continue. Talia turned back to the judge. Your Honor. Because the notarization is fraudulent, the addendum is void. Because the addendum is void, Gordon Jones never had the authority to sell the property. The deed transfer is invalid. The mortgage is invalid. The entire transaction is a nullity based on forgery. Mason's lawyer slumped in his chair. The golden shield had just turned into paper. But I wasn't done. That was just the legal victory. I needed the moral victory. I needed to expose the rot completely. Talia sat down and I stood up. I held the black hard drive in my hand. Your Honor, I said. We also asked the court to consider the financial affidavit regarding the proceeds of the home equity line of credit. The defense claims this money was used for family emergencies. But we have traced the funds. I submitted the bank records from the blue binder. The forensic accounting shows that $40,000 of the stolen equity was funneled back into the purchase deposit to create a wash trade. I said. But there is another transaction that needs to be addressed. I looked at my father. Gordon was sweating profusely now. On December 3rd, I said. Reading from the statement. A transfer of $8,000 was made from the joint account controlled by Gordon Jones. The recipient was Cyclone Debt Recovery Services. Gordon closed his eyes. I looked up Cyclone Debt Recovery. I continued. They specialize in collecting delinquent personal loans, specifically loans taken out for vehicle financing and credit card consolidation. I turned to the gallery. I looked at the few family members who had shown up. The ones Piper had tried to turn against me. My father didn't just sell my house to save Piper, I said. My voice steady. He took a commission. He used $8,000 of my equity to pay off his own credit card debt. He didn't just enable her. He profited from the theft. Gordon put his head on the table and began to weep. It was a pathetic, broken sound. I was drowning. He sobbed. I just wanted to be clear. I wanted a fresh start. You don't get a fresh start by burning down someone else's life, I said. Then I turned to Piper. She was staring at Gordon, her mouth open in shock. She hadn't known. She thought she was the only leech. She didn't realize she was feeding off a host who was also feeding on me. And as for the startup, I said, turning to the final page. We subpoenaed the records from high-stakes trade. Piper flinched as if I had slapped her. There is no business. I told the judge. There are no investors. There is just a gambling addiction. My sister lost $60,000 betting on binary options in 3 months. She didn't need a bailout. She needs a rehabilitation center. It is not gambling. Piper shrieked, jumping up. It is trading. You don't understand the market. Sit down. Judge Vance ordered. He promised me. Piper yelled, pointing at Mason. He told me the algorithm was foolproof. He told me if I just put in more capital, I would win it all back. He told me to sell the house to get the capital. The room went deadly silent. Piper froze. She realized what she had just said. She had just admitted on the record in open court that Mason Clean had solicited the sale of the home to fund a gambling scheme that he likely profited from as an affiliate. Mason closed his eyes. He knew it was the final nail. Judge Vance slammed her gavel. The sound was the sweetest thing I had heard in 4 months. The court finds that the deed transfer is void abio due to fraud. Judge Vance ruled. The title is restored immediately to Haley Jones. The liens recorded by Iron Rock Capital and the unauthorized HELOC are hereby stayed pending criminal investigation. She turned her gaze to the defense table. Mr. Clean. I am referring this transcript to the District Attorney's Office for prosecution on charges of wire fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Your real estate license is summarily revoked effective this moment. Piper Jones. The judge continued. You are remanded for investigation into identity theft and bank fraud. And Mr. Gordon Jones. God help you. You are liable for the repayment of the misappropriated funds. Drew and Leah Mercer were granted a judgment for the return of their money plus damages to be paid from Mason's errors and omissions insurance policy. They hugged each other, crying with relief. They were victims of their own greed and naivety, but they would survive. I didn't stay to watch the bailiff handcuff Mason. I didn't stay to watch Piper screaming at our father, blaming him for not protecting her. I didn't stay to hear Gordon's apologies. I walked out of the courtroom. The air in the hallway was cool. I walked past the elevator and took the stairs, my boots echoing on the concrete. I drove back to Cedar Hollow in silence. The snow had stopped. The sky was a brilliant piercing blue. I pulled into my driveway. The house looked different now. The sold sign was gone. The tire tracks from the party were covered in fresh snow. Stood quiet, solid, and enduring. I walked up the steps. I didn't need to ring the doorbell. I didn't need to knock. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key. It was the original brass key. The one I had kept on my ring through 4 months of hell in Alabama. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was empty. The furniture was where I had left it. The smell of Mason's cheap cologne and the party's stale champagne was gone, replaced by the scent of lemon polish and cold air. I walked to the center of the living room, to the spot where I had stood 2 nights ago and told them all to get out. I looked at the fireplace. I looked at the walls I had painted. I looked at the floor I had refinished. It was just wood and plaster. It was just an asset. But it was my asset. It was the physical manifestation of my survival. I took a deep breath. My chest felt lighter than it had in years. I had lost my father. I had lost my sister. I had lost the illusion that blood meant loyalty. But as I stood there in the silence, listening to the wind rattle the window panes, I realized I hadn't lost myself. I walked to the front door and locked it from the inside. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Christmas. A time of birth. A time of new beginnings. I stood before the window, watching the sun glitter on the ice, and whispered into the empty, beautiful room. This Christmas, I didn't lose my home. I only lost the people who never were my home. Thank you so much for listening to this story on HOA Karen Vialog. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please comment your city or country below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the like button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to